We're coming out of that press conference as we have got some breaking news on the broadcast, and this time we have been told that the Supreme Court has issued a notice to the Bihar government, and this is over a plea that has been put by Mr. Krishnaiah's wife. And this is regarding Anand Mohan's release from the prison. Anand Mohan to be served through SP Saharsa, and he should be listed again. The matter should be listed again before the court closes on the 19th of May. This is the latest coming out of the Supreme Court of the country. Ananya has more details. Ananya, over to you.
Well, this petition was filed by slain IAS officer g.krishnaiah's wife, Ms. g.krishnaiah, who had said that this remission that has been granted, the premature release of Anand Mohan, is something that is arbitrary in law and should not have been done. Remember, this was done because of a change in the remission policy of the Bihar government. Yes. And that's the reason why, in fact, g.krishnaiah had knocked the doors of the Supreme Court, saying that this the removing of that particular clause which led to Anand Mohan's release seems to be motivated, and this is something that is very, very unfortunate and should not have been done. Now, the Supreme Court bench, two judges bench of the topmost court of the country, has issued notice to not only the Bihar government but also the central government's home department and also in fact the remission board of Bihar to actually give out their responses. Remember that this case, though having a very, very different fact, but a similar issue is being considered in the Bilkis Bano case. However, the difference between the two cases is that, it was a Supreme Court order which the Supreme Court had directed that this particular remission policy has to be written up. But what happens into this particular case where there was no kind of a order, but a recent change in the remission policy resulted into the release of Anand Mohan. So what would the Supreme Court be saying? What kind of observations would be made? The Supreme Court has listed the matter, seeing the urgency of it and seeing how unfortunate the incident is. In fact, Mr. Siddharth Luthra, who was appearing for Ms. Krishnaiah, said that it's an unfortunate matter, and even just after hearing this, the Supreme Court issued notice and has kept the matter before the Supreme Court actually begins for a vacation.
Ananya, if you remember correctly, while changing the jail manual as far as the Bihar government is concerned, they had definitely gone back to the Supreme Court rulings earlier, spoken about life sentence and how the Supreme Court was very much in favor of these remission sentences. If we were to compare Anand Mohan's case to that of Bilkis Bano's case, where her rapists and killers were granted remission by the government in Gujarat, how does one juxtapose these two cases? Considering now that the plea is before the Supreme Court of the country, it is the apex court that is once again going to be looking at this matter as well.
Well, these cases, though seem to be very, very similar in nature, but are very, very different, because remember that in case of Bilkis Bano, the clear stark difference that is there is that those were orders of the Supreme Court itself which had asked the Gujarat government to take a particular remission policy and then decide the particular case. While in case of Anand Mohan, a recent change in the remission policy resulted into Anand Mohan's release. The clause that was actually removed from, in fact, that particular remission policy of the Bihar government was that earlier what used to happen was that people who were convicted or who were sentenced for killing government officials were not considered for a remission. But Bihar government removed that particular clause, and post that Anand Mohan was actually released. However, in case of Bilkis Bano, the case seems to be very, very different, because the amendment to that particular policy of the Gujarat government had happened for a long time, and it was the order of the Supreme Court to actually, give out a particular policy that you decide the case on this, the older policy, and that's the reason why, in fact, those particular convicts were actually remitted. So, though the case seemed to be very, very similar in nature, are very different in this case. So, how would the Supreme Court be reacting? Because remember, here there is no kind of a Supreme Court order, but just the remission policy that has been changed. So, will the Supreme Court actually reverse this whole process that has happened, and would Anand Mohan go back to jail, is something that we'll get to know on the next date of hearing.
So, Ananya, you were telling us that Anand Mohan is going to be served through the Superintendent of Police in Saharsa. This matter is going to be listed once again before the court closes on the 19th of May. When is that response by the government in Bihar being sought?
Well, the response has to be filed just before this particular hearing. It is an urgent matter, and the court has now seen the urgency of this matter and has posed the matter before the vacations, and has asked the Bihar government and central government and also the remission board of Bihar to actually file their responses. But till the next date of hearing, that is the 19th of May. So whether there would be adjournment that would be sought by the Bihar government, or whether they would be able to file this particular response, is something that we'll get to know on the next date of hearing. But very importantly, if at all of these responses are filed, what what would be very interesting and important to see is what the Bihar government has to say on this, and what the remission board has to say on this, because the papers with regards to this particular remission, because there is a lot of consideration that happens when a particular sentence is being reduced. So whether or not the Supreme Court would be considering all of those documents, and what were the comments of the remission board when remission was granted to in fact Anand Mohan, whether there was some kind of opposition by some of the member, is something that would come to light when the Supreme Court actually considers these documents and the hearing in this matter would proceed on.
Okay, thank you so much for that, Ananya. Let me bring in our colleague Pallavi Ghosh, who's also joining us on the broadcast. Pallavi, the amending in the Bihar Jail Manual 2012 in fact brought about this particular change, which led to the early release of Anand Mohan. Now the Supreme Court has decided to consider the plea of Mr. g.krishnaiah's family. What change do we expect, considering there are some answers that the Bihar government, the administration in Bihar also now need to know, considering the apex court of the country is involved? Pallavi, are you able to hear me? Okay, I don't think we have Pallavi through with us. Ananya continues to, however, remain with us. Ananya, if you were to talk to our viewers about the background of this particular case, the kind of responses that the early release of Anand Mohan generated, we'd had our correspondent Saurav speak to Anand Mohan while he was out on parole to attend his son's wedding. And he was very sure that he is, in fact, going to come out unscathed by with all absolved of all of the charges because of this change in the jail manual. Now, do you think all of that that entire stance by the Bihar government and also in turn by Anand Mohan is going to be mellowed down with this particular development coming out of the apex court of the country?
Well, you know, notices have been issued to both Anand Mohan as well, apart from the Bihar government and the remission board. So what would Anand Mohan be saying is something that would also be very important, because he would be giving out his own version of the story, saying, you know, probably when such a case appears, the accused say that they have already, given out a lot of time inside the jail premises and have actually improved their behavior, and that's the reason why they should be released. But what the Bihar government would have to say, what the central government would have to say on this, because there was a political turmoil that broke out in the state of Bihar as soon as Anand Mohan was released. There were comments from the opposition party, there were comments from all of the political parties that were coming in, and many of them actually opposing this kind of a release of Anand Mohan in this particular case. And a lot of furor had actually happened over the release of Anand Mohan. The questions were also raised on the Bihar government's conduct. But what would happen before the Supreme Court is something that is not for us to predict, but we'll have to wait and watch on the next date of hearing. What would the Bihar government would be saying is very important. Yes. And what the remission board would be saying, because remember, the remission board would be producing all of those documents which were taken on record when this particular decision was taken. The views of the judges, because judges are also consulted when such a remission has to be granted. The board consists of a lot of members, including the police officials, judges, and various other people. So whether or not their views have been taken into account, somebody has opposed it or not,
okay,
or it was a unanimous decision that was given out by the the remission board, is something that we'll get to know on the next date of hearing when the responses of all of these respondents come into the picture. But definitely it was a big move that was anticipated, and g.krishnaiah had in fact continuously told the media that she would be approaching the Supreme Court against this particular release, and now finally she has approached the court. Court has now issued notice, and the hearing in this matter would continue pre-vacations in the last week of vacations as well.
And whether or not it is a setback for Anand Mohan and this decision by the government in Bihar to amend its prison manual 2012 is something that we'd have to wait and watch out for till the next date of hearing is set up by the Supreme Court of the country.